According to UFO researchers, an anonymous source, probably someone inside the federal government, once sent a top-secret file to Stringfield. A file containing the complete government report on an autopsy performed on the body of an alien found in the remains of a crashed UFO. Before his death in 1994, Stringfield was videotaped describing the results of the autopsy report he had seen.
The medical person he had reference to had information about the anatomy of the alien, the dead alien that was taken from a crashed disc.
He is Leonard Stringfield, the retired marketing director of a large chemical company. Stringfield has devoted more than 20 years to investigating and writing about UFO phenomena. He specializes in suspected crashes and retrievals.
The head is large, very large by human proportion. There is no hair follicles. There are no earlobes. There is no nose as we have as human. The mouth is just a slit or an orifice which goes in about approximately an inch, membranous, which leads to no digestive tract or alimentary system. There were no red cells, no lymphocytes. There were no striatum muscles in the body. There was an atria, or a heart, the pumping station, so to speak, for the colorless liquid, which is, in a sense, blood.
Legendary UFO researcher Leonard Stringfield investigated Hangar 18 for close to 50 years. In a rare interview just prior to his death in 1994, Stringfield told sightings that he had been able to track the progress of wreckage and alien bodies retrieved in several different parts of the Southwest.
In the beginnings, some of them were shipped to areas in Los Alamos and the western sensitive areas from Albuquerque on down to Los Alamos and the whole region of New Mexico. And oftentimes for further analyses or study, why they were sent to Wright-Patterson. I was told by one intelligence source here some years ago that they had 30 alien bodies underground at Wright-Patterson Field alone, up to 1966.
Leonard Stringfield, a 40-year veteran of UFO investigations, agrees with Exler. The public must be prepared before a concept of such magnitude is introduced.
But you can imagine what would have happened to the stock market if something were to come out, be announced by the government, or world governments, as something of this nature. So they refer to it officially as a cultural shock.
Stringfield's interest in the UFO phenomena was piqued when in World War II he encountered what became known as Foo Fighters, mysterious balls of light in the sky that plagued and harassed pilots. Stringfield claims that the U.S. government has even recovered alien crafts and bodies and has detailed his findings in several research papers.
These are first-hand bits of information from sources who have seen the craft and or the bodies in government custody. These are people who had the need to know, access clearance to see the bodies, for instance, at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base or other areas, or did participate in a retrieval operation. I think there have been periods where there have been attempts to educate the public or spoon-feed, as I say, the public with bits of information. So if something suddenly dramatic should happen, there wouldn't be complete alarm. I was in the 5th Air Force serving in an intelligence capacity.
Okay.
And I was one of, as I recall, 12 GIs, members of my unit, flying into Japan. We were designated to be the first Americans into Japan, which was 3 days before they officially surrendered. And I was flying in a C-46 transport plane as one of the passengers. And we left the island of Ieshima, spelled Ieshima. It's right, a little island right off Okinawa. And our destination was Iwo Jima, a very famous island in the Pacific.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the staging area for our final hop to Atsugi, Japan, near Tokyo, where we were to land and take over the Atsugi Air Base for the occupation troops to follow 3 days later. So that's the background. And it was during the flight between Ieshima and Iwo Jima that I had aboard the plane encountered what I recall to be three unidentified balls of light. And this was from the left-hand side of the plane, looking forward. And it was just a momentary glimpse, really. It wasn't any long duration. Probably if I recall correctly, perhaps in view for 30 seconds, maybe less. And there was no sound. I just casually looked out the porthole, window, and it caught my attention with some brilliant light. And looking out the window, I saw what I distinguished to be three objects coming out of a heavy cloud bank, moving sort of obliquely toward and forward to the aircraft that I was on. And I'll never be able to discern just exactly the shape. It appeared to be roundish, maybe teardrop almost. The teardrop effect might have been a result of the bright light, leaving a slight retinal effect. The eyeball picks up electric glow of light. But anyway, they pursued, got reasonably close. Again, it was hard to judge that. You had no reference points, so maybe I'm talking in terms of 100 feet, maybe a little bit further than that, away from the aircraft. But there were three objects, and they were brilliant in color. They're very bright.
How large were they?
I'll never know. I believe that they were not large. They were not really teeny things. My judgment on that, and I try to think back, and I have no way of knowing, but maybe 15 feet in diameter.
Okay.
That's just a guess. It could have been 10. It could have been 20. But as they approached the aircraft, our plane suddenly dipped and dropped approximately 25 to 50 feet, maybe more, just straight down. And in my opinion, it was a result of the proximity of the so-called Foo Fighter, and that I had witnessed. And then apparently there was some disturbance up in the cockpit of the plane, although I had no access to the pilot or the co-pilot. And I was sitting in the back. Now, later, when I talked to one of the fellows aboard the craft, after I was off the plane and even back in the States, I discussed this with him, and he said that there was some concern about the performance of the aircraft at that time by the pilot. He was sitting up in the front of the plane, although I did not observe this. And the objects, as our airplane descended suddenly, the objects just suddenly vanished, retreated back into a cloud bank and disappeared. And then what really surprised me was that the aircraft picked up its lost altitude and flew on to Iwo Jima safely. And there was no Foo Fighters in sight, nor were there any other, unusual occurrences within the craft. Now, when I got off the airplane in Iwo Jima, I noticed oil had splashed all over the side of the craft from the left engine. Although I have no way of knowing that had anything to do with the Foo Fighters.
Tonight, I actually, a couple of days ago, knowing that I would be here and talking for a research group, I wondered just what would I relate to those of you who knew the subject. I knew I couldn't buffalo you, and so my wife was speaking to a Sunday school group. You could tell them almost anything and they'd believe you. And I realized here I can't fool you, so I have to be very careful what I say. But I have something to say. And the reason for this is a paper that I have prepared and working on for several months, very diligently. It's entitled Retrievals of the Third Kind. And it concerns, in my belief, the hardware, the officials, the Air Force have been hiding from the public for many, many years. And that would also include the occupants. I dared publish some of this in my book, some basic knowledge that I had. At that time, I could not prove what I was relating, but I thought it sounded pretty good because it came from a reliable source. Of course, when the book was published by Doubleday and it got out on a national basis, why, additional information started to sneak my way from various sources that had treated the information I had read sub rosa for years, and very carefully was related to me, which perked up my ears. I became concerned. I thought, well, here's a subject that has been taboo in research from practically its inception, thanks to a book written by Frank Scully, Behind the Flying Saucers, back in 1950. It is now my belief that the book was a contrived book put there on purpose to reduce or subdue the interests of researchers such as myself in those early years, referring to anyone who would dare bring up this type of thing in serious research would be laughed right out of the business because it was generally referred to as the little green man and so forth and so on. In other words, an atmosphere was created by certain authorities to keep the subject played down, and they were, we all know, very, very successful until Stringfield decided to do something else a few months ago, and it opened up a whole new can of worms. So what I've done, talk I had prepared to relate to you this evening, I tore the whole thing up yesterday. I said there's no use of trying to address an elite group such as you with more UFO sightings, nocturnal lights, close encounters. After all, they've all been published, retold. We're all quite aware of those. We all know who's who in research. We all know what the research groups are doing, good or bad. We've heard all the theories. So why should I get up here and waste your time tonight with the twice-told tales? There are at least 2,000 books on the market, and they'll all say the same thing. At this point, I'm going to get right to the point. I have no trim, no fat, pardon the expression, no crap. I think it's time for truth, and when I read my 53-page report, again entitled Retrievals of the Third Kind, I think perhaps you'll realize what I'm trying to relate. I think the data that I have within 17 abstracts in my paper from information I gathered from what I consider to be very reliable sources should open the eyeballs of somebody. If the mass media is there attending, and they've all been invited, they know the subject, title of the subject. If they're there to truly be objective, they will listen to me and report it accordingly. They do a good test. So what I'm about to write, it's a very, very, believe me, very sensitive subject. Now, I'll warn you, tonight when I speak with some of these matters in this subject, I can only tease you, because I cannot reveal at this time the contents of my paper, which will be revealed on July 29th in Dayton. As you'll probably all know, the MUFON Symposium is an annual affair, and each year a city is picked. And this year, propitiously, it's Dayton, right next to Wright-Patterson Field. And that is the sensitive area, indeed. I gave it some thought before I actually started to work on this self-assignment. I knew it was sensitive. I knew I had certain bits of information in mind to use. And in time, other parts and pieces of this type of information reached me, which encouraged me. I came to a point, really, should I do it or not? I knew that it could either be, in the end, glorified, sanctified, or vilified when I was through. Or canonized, perhaps. I decided that I've gone this far in my life, having had my own experience with UFOs and a plane that almost crashed as a result of them, UFO. I lived through that. I lived through 28 years of ups and downs in research, and those of you who have been in that long or even less know what it can do to you. And I've held up under that. although my wife might disagree. But anyway, I survived it all. And I thought, well, let's tackle the big one. Here's my swan song, here's my big challenge, to really go into this all the way. And I did. I pushed everything else aside to concentrate in this one endeavor to collect as much good, solid information as possible from the best sources to make the paper as solid as possible to present for the world public. Certain bits of information came to me in very surprising ways. People following a talk would come up and say, I have something to talk to you about when everybody goes away. I had one excellent case in this regard, a man who had seen the retrieved occupants firsthand. And he described them to me in the circumstances before. And this I thought was just a little strange, because it came from a pilot who had been in the military and had top security clearance. And when I got this little information, I decided that this was the turning point that I would pursue it. And I really did. Everything to me that it had been at one time a rumor or something, fifth, sixth, eighth hand, I went after it. It took a lot of doing, very careful, cautious, persistent work, and practically became a 24-hour daily job to pursue many of these loose ends. But I did it. And the long story short, by January, February this year, I'd come up with an amazing amount of material. New material that had never been known to most researchers before. When you get into a sensitive area like this, if you get by the one person, sometimes they can relate you to another person who may be way over in Timbuktu, but we can eventually get to them. Again, being always cautious, diplomatic, and all the other virtues that goes with getting information. So by April the 5th or 6th, I had completed my papers. And I took a good long second look at everything, wondered, should I really do this? And I said, well, I got it finished. There's all the works. Why not? So I informed Walt Andrich, director of MUFON, that I had come this far, the paper is ready. I marked at the top, confidential, in red. I asked Walt not to reveal the contents of this paper to no one, even the typist and the printer. That's a joke, but they got to see it. But anyway, I had laid some careful groundwork. I retained a copy at home, the original copy. I turned a copy over to another person unknown to anyone in case something should happen to me or my paper. Perhaps it could be purloined. And so I'd made a lot of groundwork, a lot of little preparations, which I won't go into right now in case something happened. Then some rather amazing things happened. And I guess in this particular area I have to tease you because I can't really tell you what happened. I feel a little abashed by that, but that's the way it is. I can say this, that it is an extremely sensitive area that I picked on. And of course, the subject, as I had mentioned before, retrievals of the third kind includes the retrievals of the craft, UFO, and the occupants. I have, at this point, I can say, much data on the retrieved disc. Now, there's more than one. We've always heard of the famous one back in New Mexico, the Aztec affair, and perhaps another one in the West, or two or three. Perhaps all of you have heard these in the form of rumors. Well, I have 17 sources of information concerning a number of crashes throughout the United States, exclusive of those overseas that I'm aware of. These will be presented in my talk in Dayton. And then since then, I've added 8 more sources, which will not be in the paper. Some of these sources will be used in the form of addenda. 2 of them are so super sensitive, I'm not quite sure at this time if I can use them. But I'll give it 100%. Then there's another source under no circumstances can I reveal. It all sums up to this, the information I have right now. Surely as I'm standing here, I guess I'm standing. But I know this, the real UFO, at least one of them, one type, does absolutely exist, incontrovertibly exist. And also I'll say that incontrovertibly we have them. We've had them in military custody since 1947. That's one retrieval I'm aware of. No occupants. 1948, with occupants. 1952, 1953, 1957, 1962, 1973, and 1977. We have retrieved craft with occupants. And there are more. Much of this dating, I reiterate, will be revealed in 17 abstracts of paper. Possibility of using 2, 3, perhaps 4 more. And again, I'll say that other information I have, I don't think I'll be able to reveal it because it deals with material referred to as crypto.
What do you mean by that?
That's sub rosa, super secret, above top secret. And I've touched the outside of the circle of information. I don't think I've said too much. I plan to say this much. And I don't know, it seems to me that it'd be futile to go into, at this time of with that information, to go into a whole lot of sightings, close encounters, live encounters. This too will be presented by Ted Loescher, who has collected over 1,800 close encounter cases in his catalog, live encounters. This in itself is extremely interesting. Of course, we'll be very fortunate to have Ted Loescher at the MUFON meeting to relate on that subject. In fact, the whole meeting should be interesting. We have Dr. Hynek there, who will again tell us if they're from another realm. And we have Major Kehoe will be there to, I'm sure, to relate his feelings about the Air Force. And then Dick Hall, who is a very well-informed researcher, a good historian in the subject, will be there to relate certain data, as I understand it, during the significant year of 1967, and of course the title of my subject. So it should be a very interesting meeting. I talked to Dr. Hynek about a week and a half ago before he took off for a short vacation in Italy. And he was extremely interested in the title of my paper. I told him I was not in a position to relate information, especially over the telephone, to him. And he seemed really very interested. And we can, of course, realize why a man of his position as a doctor in astronomy and so forth could not touch on the same subject that I selected because of his scientific position and the fact that he had been top scientific consultant to the Air Force for 20 years. If he were to get up and daringly say the same thing that I planned, why, it would put him in a better jeopardy of his position. So I can appreciate somebody at his status not being able to talk as freely as I have chosen to do. But I decided, and I've told several colleagues here this evening, I'm going up there on that stage and present my case, even if I have to crawl up there. I plan to go through it. Another announcement, again, sort of a tease, but I have one source outside of Ohio who has what I consider a major document, and he is well aware of what I'm doing. In fact, he was the informant in one of my very important incidents, who hopes, unless he's interfered with, to present this document in support of my claims. If this paper, plus what I plan to reveal, all works out as we see it as of right now, it should become a major bit of news to the whole world. Certainly provocative, certainly sobering, use all sorts of adjectives. I think a lot depends, and Earl and several of us discussed this, just what will be the reaction of the media Well, we cannot predict that. Earl mentioned that perhaps it may get as far as Dayton newspapers or the Cincinnati Columbus paper, maybe Ohio, and that'll be about it. I really don't know how they'll react. If there is a reaction to what we present, relay, and it does make AP, UP, CBS, ABC, and NBC, I think it will reach proportions of a saucer Watergate. I think there'll be senatorial investigations because they're going to have to disprove what I'm saying. My only weakness, and I admit this, I confess this in my papers, that I have no affidavits to support the information I have. In most cases, I cannot use names because of sensitivity of the material, which is understandable. This then can be construed by the major media as having a weak case. Then it would depend entirely on how reliable I am. And hopefully I have been able to establish to some degree some credibility in my 28 years of research. Now, again, it'll be a major test, it'll be of major interest to me and everyone, I believe, is the reaction of the media. I can anticipate the reaction of general researchers in the field, and the general public I wouldn't dare predict, but I think first of all, we have to run over, we as researchers, and we do number in the many thousands. If we can get things moving there, that's at least something in my favor. But again, it's still, we have not convinced the nation. We're only talking amongst ourselves. This is what we've been doing for years. Researchers are talking to researchers. What I'm trying to do is get to the public, the masses, the media. If I can accomplish that, something's going to have to give. So it's going to be a good test. I don't know how to predict it. I could get shot down and suffer character assassination in the works. And I'm willing to go forward, I'll say here and now, it's 2 months away, and stand that risk. Because I believe what I say. I know the information I got is from, as far as I'm concerned, unimpeachable sources. Rather than go on again, let's say I scrapped my talk, which I would normally make. I'm just talking at the beginning here, right off the top of the head, with no really prepared notes. Because I feel very sincere in what I'm saying. And I think without further ado, not going into the life horrors of research and many theories, UFO sightings, close encounters, and all those interesting things, I'm going to throw the meeting over to questions and answers, and hopefully I'll try to answer them as honestly as possible, realizing, of course, that there's a lot of information that I cannot relate to you, that, of course, that which is enclosed in my contents of my paper, and that's my choice because I have to keep that information confidential because I told the informant that it would not be revealed prior to that, and also gave instructions to all handlers to please abide by my wishes. And of course, I cannot talk about other data that I may use as addenda. So at this point, I'll take a little drink of water and we'll throw it open to questions, hopefully answers. I do have the names of places where certain things have occurred, where the objects have been taken, back where they ended up, staging area, what was done, what was seen in that particular area, where they were sent for some instances for further research medically. In many instances where a specialist was sent in to check the metals involved as a specialist. Certainly, a man with that within close proximity of a retrieved UFO would know whether he was working on a crashed airplane or a disc. And when a description of the UFO is given, its precise size, the position of the hatches and the interior, with supporting photographs and the works, which I have, is good enough for me. Now, again, the weakness that I have is not being able to use his name, but again, the weight of my case is in the preponderance of material. If I were to come out with 3 or 4 cases, it would be quite a strong, but hopefully not being able to use the names in most of the better incidents, it's understandable. They'll have to go along with this. To breach a promise there would be something I wouldn't do, whether I got my name spared or not, because I think what I'm doing at this stage is something no one else has ever attempted to do. And I feel like doing this much is the beginning. And there's always a possibility that at a later date, maybe a month after that, 2 months, fall, I will present a second paper to certain channels with additional information, perhaps with even the names. Because I tell you this, I feel as though the climate is changing and that there may be more revealed in due course, and perhaps I might be in a position to reveal some of it.
In regard to the ETs, do you have much evidence of a medical examination, all the fact that they maybe have the same type of flesh and blood that we have? And so anything that...
I'm aware of certain details of the general configuration and certain facial appearance of the being. At this time, I can reveal nothing medically about the being. Maybe sometime in the future. But right now, what little I know, I prefer not to mention, and the possibility of learning more. This is a very vital area to me, and but what little I know, I'd rather not reveal. But I do have a drawing here that I have made. It's a composite of the... I can't let you have this for duplication at this time, but this is a composite of the facial features of the entity, generally speaking, with a little give and take here and there. And I think I might be in a position to comment on that in about 2 more months.
Am I allowed to ask you one question? The way they breathe like we do.
That I don't know.
As far as you know. Okay.
That I don't know. I could stand here and conjecture on a lot of things, on what little I know. And my guess would be guesses, and they could be completely wrong and erroneous, and therefore I'd be misleading. And I'd rather be reticent in these areas than come out and sensationalize. I think I've done that enough. I think I've sensationalized already by bringing up the subject without giving you any more details. But hopefully, in time, or at least by July 29th, I will have even more data to put in my roundup or the wind-up of the papers than I have now. I'm leaving this open, how I'm going to end mine.
Yeah, because the reason I asked you that is the one figure that I saw in the sign I had was I could see, like, where we normally would breathe for our mouth, I could see, the part right through here would be going back and forth, and we were breathing somehow through here.
Where did you see that?
In my home.
Well, I don't think anyone really could at this time. We can only conjecture. Again, if the intelligence is so far advanced over us in so many ways, technically, it probably would also be advanced in the area of psychics. And having possession of that gift, they would probably be controlling our minds, letting us see what they wanted to see for whatever ulterior purposes they had in their minds, their thinking, their rationale, and could have mesmerized you or put you in a thought-controlled position where you were putting it together based on their control of your mind. I made myself clear. But the belief, my belief is that they do have the power to control the mind, because in most encounter cases they don't really talk. They're all thought control anyway. In the preponderance of cases that I've investigated, apart from what I know about the little creatures, but they don't talk, they don't verbalize. I've had descriptions given to me by people who've had contact or whatever you want to call it, close encounters, very close, with psychic effects of the whole works. And descriptions there would fall precisely in line with what you're relating. People will have effects where they see everything in mathematical equations. per week. They'll see the ocean in red, sky green, everything in opposites or in blocks or whatever. There's all these the phantasmagoria, the whole works.
All this is
in complete disarray and as a fantasy, and we cannot account for that, and I certainly can't. But these are cases that I'm sure that are being looked into hopefully by a Heinrich group someday. I hope that our scientists who say that we're dealing with something from another realm or whatever, that they can put some of this together and form a pattern so that we will know something someday. Just talk about it all the time. I hope we can find a pattern for this stuff.
All these saucers you have, or UFOs, are they all seem to be made the same type, or are they different types?
With variation.
Variation. What about the occupants? Are they thinking the same? Are they the same type of beings or different?
I can only answer that limitedly right now, but they're generally size, height, 3.5 to 4.5 feet, and generally described similarly, with a few features here and there a little askew from the other.
I know of your recent involvement in connection with the United Nations and trying to get their involvement, and particularly your involvement with the political runaround of the different ambassadors and government representatives in one sort or another. You mentioned this evening that there were quite a few possible crashes in the United States, not counting the overseas incident. What I'm interested in is, with your contact with government representatives there at the UN in particular, what involvement is there with these various other countries? How are they able to keep this super secret?
They work in many instances cooperatively with the United States and have the same suppression system there as we have here. They all have their equivalent to the CIA. And many of them are connected with us to NATO. Of course, we work cooperatively there. We have very close and had close links with England, Australia, New Zealand, and other countries who depend on us for our technology and wherewithal to do proper research, and it's only to their good to work in concerted action in this area. In reference to my work at the United Nations for 1 week last winter, I was asked by the Prime Minister of Grenada to work with his ambassadors in presenting, hopefully, at the United Nations 32nd Assembly to introduce a committee, a working group within the United Nations, and I gave my full support of that. This was known to the United States government, and I even advised them on the approach to the at the United Nations. And I sat in on all the meetings at the UN. I watched the response of all the foreign delegates. I knew what was going on sort of behind the scenes. I was realized the United States put much pressure. I was right there when they called. A commander in the Coast Guard was on the phone at least twice that morning while I was sitting with the ambassador. And some of their comments, pressure was on heavy. They even referred to Grenada, its position as far as human rights in the world. There was not too much cooperation. Why, they could always refer to their human rights stance. This is a good wedge, a good weapon used against nations if they don't behave according to the way we like. This has been Carter's approach, you know. What about human rights in South Africa, human rights here and there? And the same thing, the same tourniquet was applied to Grenada, because there was intelligence information that I was aware of that they were planning hanging with Chile, which is communist. I was with the Prime Minister. I was by the Prime Minister sitting with during his news conference when he was drilled by 2 reporters on this matter. He emphatically denied that. He says Grenada, its people are highly religious people. They have no communist affiliations, regardless of what the United States may charge. I could see through the whole thing because what they were doing was planning to work on a very delicate subject, UFO. And this was not the time, according to the U.S. plan, to talk about the UFO in the 33rd, 32nd Assembly of the United Nations. So we agreed to modify the text of our points, and hopefully we'll come back 33rd Assembly in September of the coming year and do it all over again. And on this note, a week and a half ago, since the title of my papers had become known publicly, nationally, a word like that gets around pretty fast, believe me. I got a call from the ambassador in Grenada, who advised me that the Prime Minister, Sir Eric Gary, will be in New York for 4 days, and would I please be able to find a way to get to New York and have a private meeting with him. I had to decline, because at that time my mother was in the hospital seriously ill. I had no alternative but to be there and be with her, so I told the ambassador that my circumstances, that I could not make it. I regretted it, perhaps another time. But I knew what the Prime Minister was concerned about was the title of my paper, and he may want to use that once the paper is disclosed in the 33rd Assembly, which he would be entitled to, but by that time it would be public knowledge. However, what I will not give to the Prime Minister is the additional data that I'm aware of, which is even more sensitive.
These retrievals, are we to assume that most of these are shot down, or half of them are mechanical failures, or what?
That's a question that I have. No one has been able to clarify that to me. I'm assuming that these were due from malfunction. I have truthfully no knowledge, and I could be wrong, no knowledge of any crashed UFO to be a result of our firing missiles or whatever at them. I'm assuming, therefore, that these were malfunctions for one reason or another, which to me indicates that the real UFO is not an imperfect machine. I have wondered for many years in early research that the UFOs could make no mistakes, therefore they must be from another dimension or whatever. They just don't make mistakes. But now I realize that they do have a human quality.
Oh, but these are all basically what we call little scout ships, though, that we're talking about.
Basically,
motherships.
Right, that is correct.
So these may be come into our realm intentionally just to provide us a little...
Well, I don't think they would, I don't think that, well, I doubt that intentional crashes, because in some instances we're aware of the fact that some of the bodies were charred, pretty well burned. I am aware of the fact, too, that some of our most significant close encounters and landings have occurred on military installations, nuclear installations, and missile sites in the United States and in foreign countries. So if there is curiosity in these areas, therefore there would be a preponderance of UFOs also in these areas, and also thereby a greater chance for a crash instance in each of these sensitive areas. I cannot give a positive answer, but this is generally speaking on the how, but the wherewithal operating.
More directly, I was interested in why the need for this security.
Security? Oh. Well, why is there secrecy?
Right.
That's many answers to that one. One, the old throwback when the CIA believed that there would be a cultural shock back in the 50s, and therefore the public was not prepared for this sort of thing, therefore say nothing, deny everything. Let's create an atmosphere as a result of the Robertson panel to say nothing, no matter what means we need to keep the information down, do it. And that would, of course, the idea of fear of a cultural shock, or psychological panic, or philosophical panic, or whatever. That's the old popular reason for suppression of such information, which could have been applicable through the years. There's another aspect, too, and I'd like to speculate here, that if we've had these retrievals of the craft going back as far as 48, early 50s, we certainly would expect our government not to go to sleep at the switch, and there would therefore be some attempt to duplicate some of the items in there to whatever degree. And if there were duplications of such pieces of equipment or the craft itself, well, naturally that would be kept secret, in fact top secret. And that would be another reason why there would be secrecy, and certainly a valid Because if we are going to be working competition with Russia, so to speak, and China, why? But they are also gathering information. It becomes sort of a contest in that area, so that would be a very valid reason for keeping information. It's also possible that they have a lot of information concerning about the craft, some idea where they're from, being extraterrestrial. They don't know the intent. And if they don't know the intent, they announced to the public that they knew about the craft to some degree, that they exist, and a little bit of information about that. And yes, they were extraterrestrial. But when the press pressed in for information, why are they here, and they couldn't answer it, then this would then create an atmosphere of even more fear in the public mind. So that would be a good reason. So you got all these reasons why there would be secrecy, or take all of them, put them together. So I believe the National Security Council and those who make decisions in this area would consider all those viewpoints in making a decision for secrecy. Until, of course, as it's building up now, I think there's a realization at this point that they cannot do it any longer, and I think they are working on ways and means to bring the public into their confidence. And we may see more of this before the year's out.